Hi, everyone. Welcome to Food Talk with Dani Nierenberg. I get to chat with one of my favorite people today, Kim Severson of the New York Times. She's a badass. She's the national food correspondent for the New York Times and won the 2018 Pulitzer Prize for Public Service for her contributions to the team that investigated sexual harassment and abuse against women. She also has won 4 James Beard Awards and the Casey Medal for meritorious journalism for her work on childhood obesity. She's been a staff writer at the San Francisco Chronicle, and editor and reporter at the Anchorage Daily News in Alaska, and has covered crime, education, social services, and politics for other newspapers along the West Coast. She's written 4 books, including The Trans Fat Solution and Cook Fight, a collaborative book with fellow New York Times writer Julia Moskin. And like me, she's a Midwesterner by birth, which is probably why I like her so much. Hey, Kim, thanks for joining us.
I'm so glad to be here. Glad to talk to you again. How are you doing?
Good, good. The last time I saw you was in October at the Smithsonian for a really fun event. And this is, I think, the sort of the inspiration for this talk because so much has happened, over the last few months. So I'm hoping we can talk about trends and a little bit about politics and the way food systems and agriculture are changing. Does that sound good?
Absolutely. I mean, as if we really know, but we'll give it a shot. See
We'll try. We'll
what's
try.
out there. I mean, things change so quickly, right? So,
I know. Yeah, quicker than we can keep up.
yeah.
I want to start with some of the issues that we've talked about before and the ways that food companies are trying to market to younger consumers about sustainability, especially younger eaters about sustainability. What strategies do you expect companies to continue to reach Gen Z, Gen Alpha, et cetera? Do you think they'll stay with what they've been doing, sort of trying to make themselves more genuine and have a story behind the food? What do you think will change?
I think that this Gen Z actually is affecting um, more demographics in terms of how we eat than any other. I mean, the millennials, there was it didn't really substantially change how we all eat, but Gen
Right,
Z, I
right.
think, is definitely having, at least, it's what is it, 20% of the population. And for the food marketers and folks I talk to, they're really impacting some changes in how we eat. And a lot of it is we're in a very like break the rules moment, right? So
Mhm,
obviously,
mhm.
the new administration is all about turning things on its head and breaking rules. And I think that's happening across the board with how we're starting to eat, and even on basic levels. Gen Z, it doesn't. They're not going to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, appetizer, entree, dessert. Like that doesn't matter. It's
Right,
very snackification. The
right.
idea of global flavors and mixing in and bold flavors, I think, is continuing to affect kind of what we're seeing. And also,
Hmm.
they will eat a, Nashville hot chicken bao dipped in pickle ranch and just for the see how that goes, and
Right,
not in any
right.
way that they're trying to like, it's not sort of 60s generation blow up the establishment. It's just very practical in a way. It's a super practical generation. It's also interesting because transparency on labels means, I mean, the minute that Gen Z smells something being off in terms
Right.
of marketing, they're not going to buy it. And so it's forcing food companies that used to be able to get away with, oh, I don't know, we were in that era where local food became such a thing that even Lay's potato chips would, advertise its Florida potato farmers and then local food, Lay's potato chips.
Yeah.
So that, kind of commodification of local food in the food industry, I think that does not work anymore at all. And companies are seeing that. There's also, I think, a real move to, and this started a while ago, if you remember, that idea of clean food labels, right? And if you remember a while back, God, maybe it's 15, 20 years now, but I don't know, maybe 15 years, Haagen-Dazs came out with a great market, which was like 5 ingredients. Our ice
Right, right.
cream only has 5 ingredients, as if it was like like, oh my God, and it really was all they were using to, but it was just, a revelatory thing for people, that sort of mass market food industry simple label concept. And that's
Yeah.
really, I think, holding true now. I'll be really interested to see the seed oil kind of
Mm.
revolution thing. I'm really watching that closely. I feel like, I think people want to assign, make food ingredients the devil, which they've done for a long time. People who are
Yeah.
and happy with, I mean, obviously what we eat affects us tremendously. And so people, I think, will look for a demon, particularly people who are into eating healthier. And so, is seed oil a demon or is it
Sure.
the latest distraction? I guess we'll find out. I'm
Yeah.
interested to see what you think about that. It feels like that just popped up out of nowhere, the demon seed oil.
Right. Yeah. And I kind of don't get it, but yeah, I don't know where that will go because you're right. It popped out of nowhere and then I don't know what to do with it. You know what I mean? It's one of those things I've just like thought about, sort of on the side, but don't know really what to do with it. What do you think do you think that Gen Alpha will follow in the steps of Gen Z or will they eat differently?
I think that these changes are going to stick. Just the idea of, everything moves, right? So, and it may seem like things go backwards, but really, the arc of changing how we eat is, it's, I mean, I look back on when farmers markets were considered kind of a radical thing, and back in,
Right.
the
Right.
early Japanese California, those early days. And now
Right.
farmers markets are considered sort of essential piece of urban development and
Right.
developers will try to make space in their little, their apartment building for the, farmers markets are like an amenity and we all sort of take it for granted and
Right.
local food is really in our, Kroger cares a lot about local foods and
Yeah.
ways. So, that's a change that, regardless through the Bush years or the ups and downs of agricultural policy, that
Mhm.
stayed consistent. And I think what we're seeing from Gen Z, which is a real no bullshit kind of approach to how they eat,
Mhm.
also a very loose, scratch food is really big. Home cooking, like the idea of pure home cooking is really big among Gen Zers, but they also appreciate a night out at Chili's for like bottomless chips and
Or,
salsa and cheap
or
margaritas. Like, and I was I'm trying to look into this story about egg production now, which is kind of fascinating in this country and the definitions. And Gen Zers will buy, pasture raised eggs. Like that matters to them. You know, uh,
Mhm.
if they can afford it, first of all. I mean, it's something
Mhm.
that if they can't, they won't, but they really will buy that. So that matters. And again, at the same time, they'll want like freeze-dried Skittles just to check it out because it's
Right.
fun. So,
Right.
there's this super, I kind of like it. It's a
I
little
do too.
bit like practical, but also,
Fun.
so I really feel like it's going to be, I think it's going to be long lasting change, and we'll see with the next group coming up. One generation always kind of rejects the generation in front of it, but we'll see. I think Gen Z will have the kind of lasting impact on how we eat that the boomer generation did. I think it's that.
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting. You mentioned scratch food cooking, and I've sort of been reading just for fun about these traditional wives on like TikTok
Bad
and others
wives.
who are, and it's
Oh,
like it boggles my mind, like ballerina farm, like they're just eating everything off the farm. These are wealthy folks who could, build a farm and do it
right.
very from
Right.
from yeah,
It
seed
is
to
interesting.
seed to fork, but it's crazy to me. And I wonder what your thoughts are.
Right. I think it's fascinating. It's so many things coming together, right? There's I mean, we see with, the Trump administration and this whole notion of, um, the place that men hold in society and women.
Yeah.
And, I just, the whole, when they started going like, my body, his choice after the election, that whole female, like, I can't even begin to
Right.
comprehend how that is happening. But I do
Yeah.
think that idea of farm raised food and those, I mean, the thing we all thought about, food from the farm and traditional farm families and all of those things that we sort of romanticized in the, sustainable food movement. And we had some, I
Yeah.
think, kind of unrealistic ideas about being able to feed this country with the sustainable farm, with the Joel Salatin method. I think we all wanted to think you could produce food that way, but it was also seen as
Right.
radical. And I think the right rejected it just because it was, code signaling for the left. And now this idea of, raw milk. I mean, let's just talk about raw milk and
Yeah.
RFK Jr. Like the Venn diagram of RFK Jr. and conservative politics and libertarian politics and Alice Waters is like there's like a Venn diagram where it's this
Yeah.
thing, they don't want to have, the very anti certain ag chemicals. The idea
Right.
that chemicals in our food supply are doing terrible things. Raw milk and raw food diets, like it's fascinating to me. So we'll see
Yeah.
where that ends up. And that's the place that I'm interested in. And this
Yeah.
place, they're going to blow up traditional, institutions. And, will that extend to, soybean farmers
Mm.
and the China market? Will tariffs blow up things? So then maybe we'll see, a real shakedown. And maybe if you take the trad wife, Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, a thing that loves farms and real cooking and real food, which are values we all, I think, can agree on. And will it translate into something larger once this administration passes? Like, will we have yet moved one more step toward eating real food, which
Yeah.
is, I think, in my opinion, what we all want, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's easy to just be, you know, terrified about what might happen to
Right.
the government institutions that support good agriculture. I mean, I don't know if you can remember, let me take you back to the previous Trump administration. And the USDA stopped publishing any studies that mentioned climate change, like even just in passing, and they
Right.
suppressed all that. They closed it. A lot of good ag research
Right.
just was stopped. I
Yeah.
used as a reporter, I could call it like there was the great blueberry market person who understood where blueberries were in this country and
Right.
the imports and what blueberry growers were facing. And as a reporter, I could call up that ag marketing person and I could report on it, right?
Right.
So it any of that communication
Right.
stopped. So under the Trump administration, everything that reporters, food writers wanted got funneled to one office that would never call you back.
Exactly.
I mean, it just got
Exactly.
down. And they tried to move the ag department to Kansas City as a way to, clean the ranks. And so all these really great agriculture, studies and work, the things that the, land grant
Yep.
universities and the ag department used to do for farmers on the ground who are trying to grow, deal with climate change in their apples and how do they make a different breed of apple that consists, all that was gone. So anyway, it's, for me, it's just research and access to information. That's
Yeah.
what matters. And I feel like the idea to just shut it down and to, suppress any kind of really good, reasonable research about
Yeah.
agriculture is super concerned to me.
Me too. And I had the same experience with the first Trump administration trying to get through to USDA and just like, there was a lot of turnover there. So I'd sort of make inroads with one person and then that person would leave. So
Right.
it's sort of frustrating because I've had such good relationships over the last 4 years with, so many government agencies. So yeah, I fear that too.
Right.
One thing that, came up a lot during the presidential election is, the idea of universal school lunches and what Governor Walz has done. And were you surprised to see that sort of come about during the election? And what do you think will happen now?
Yeah, I thought that was terrific. I've long thought that universal school lunches, if nothing else, just takes the administrative paperwork off the desks of
Right.
people at schools who are just really trying to educate the kids. And, it's such a small investment overall for, the amount of money people would save, districts save in personnel and in, administrative stuff. And, it's such a weird and punitive system. And I feel like
Hmm.
universal school lunch, I think that the pandemic helped people see that a lot because
Hmm.
they kept delivering lunches, even, on school buses, to kids, they would drive through the neighborhoods and deliver lunches. So that's going to be an interesting one. I think it's going to depend on some leadership in the agriculture department. And I think you could almost, there's a place where RFK Jr. really believes in that. However, his thing is to try to get uh, ultra processed food and corporate food out of the school lunch program. And as you know the amount of processed food that is in the system. So I'm a school lunch lady, right? And I want to buy. I've got so much money. The USDA has this sort of shopping list of things I can go get.
Right.
So surplus chicken that the government will give it a subsidy to Tyson, who'll make it into chicken nuggets specifically for the school market, and then the school lunch person can buy that inexpensive chicken nugget. So the way that food companies are baked into school lunch systems is, because I think RFK uh, junior has such an aversion to processed food that it may be difficult to get to move the school lunch program to a universal thing without with pressure to get all, I think the
Yeah.
whole thing will be kind of scrambled for it to happen. But I think the political appetite for it from top to bottom is really there. I think
Yeah.
people understand like school food is a great thing. And, you know, I don't think any parent wants to keep doing that, and the people are like, well, my kid has to pay full price. It's like $4. Like,
Right.
really? Are you
Right.
gonna for that? But I think everybody could go for it. So I think universal school lunch is coming. I really
Good.
do. It's be right away, but I believe we've made so much strides. And it was interesting that it became like a thing and a national issue in the
Yeah.
election. I love
I
that.
loved it too. And it seems like it can be very bipartisan, which is what we know. We need some of that civility to come back. So I'm
Right.
hopeful.
Oh, you're such a
I know
dreamer.
I'm
I love
naive.
it.
I'm old but naive. But yeah, no, I hope things are different. We'll see what happens. Um, I want to talk about GLP-1s and what your thoughts are on sort of the future, how they're affecting portion sizes at both in both grocery stores and restaurants, and what do you think is going to happen?
Right. I think it's fascinating. And I know so many people where it's the joke, like, oh, are they on the needle? Like I just, and restaurant people, I was talking to a chef who he owns like a restaurant group that has about 15 restaurants in cities in the South who's, and he said it's been, it's changed his life. And he like, he was
Yeah,
he's a recovering alcoholic and he said he understands the food addiction thing. And he said it's just taken that away. And so, he's still going to order the ribeye. He'll just eat, a third of it.
sure, sure.
And I think restaurant portions overall, there's been pressure to reduce portion size in America for some time. And, Marion Nestle and some of our, we know, have been researching the food system for a long time, have long talked about portion size being one of the biggest issues with obesity in this country, right? And so there's already been a move, and I think, people, there's certainly the group of people who want, like, I want to have my big
Hmm.
entree, take half home for
Right,
lunch. But there's a lot of people who really prefer, and again, it's Gen Z, maybe they just want to have two or three little appetizers when they sit down. They don't
right.
want to have the entree. So there's already this move to reduce portion sizes. And then, I think with the new Ozempic style drugs, whether that's going to have a huge, because I don't think everybody's going to be on it, and I think it's
Yeah, yeah.
expensive. The thing that I have that I think is at least where we're seeing it now is protein. Like I think we're going to see, you've already seen like cereals that like protein,
Right.
and it's like you're just special. Okay, they used to have it anyway. So I've seen lots of food labeled with protein. You've seen like the rise of cottage cheese, of course, was this idea, and it's Jim Bros and people who are on the needle are pushing protein, right? So and then also that that's becoming a meat kit company that was directly targeted on menopausal women. And
Mm,
so I was starting to have discussions about how women's bodies change in older women, and
interesting.
that's very protein focused too. But the idea that you would market your meal kit to menopausal women and the notion of, I think that discussion is, I guess my point is I think that portion sizes are getting attacked on a lot of levels. And I
Yeah.
think we're also moving into this real uh, niche area where people want to be able to see themselves and their, sort of bodily
Hmm.
quirks in other people. So you have people talk about, diet and menopause and how that affects. I don't
Hmm.
know if you saw the campaign that was a year or two ago, Hot Girls Have IBS. And it was
Yeah,
this like super pink bucket hat kind of like cool campaign. So and there's a
sure.
new lactate pill called Milky that's targeted to Gen Zers. People might have lactose
Nice.
intolerance. And
Yeah.
I don't know if this is true, but I know among our staff, people are talking about feeling like food allergies are just much more prevalent,
Mm.
not kind of
Hmm.
being, it's not like in the kitchen, they're like, oh, like everybody asked, you have food allergies. And while a lot of us were like, come on, are you really gluten free? Or are you just like doing that because whatever,
Right. 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 Right.
like, do you have celiac? I mean, I had a lot of, food allergy skepticism, but I really see that it's breaking into these groups where it's like I see you and you see me, so we're gonna, have tribal identification over our food allergy
Sure.
or menopause, So I think that's a super interesting place, and I think
Absolutely.
Ozempic drugs are just sort of one part of this of us really drilling into how we eat and how it affects our body,
And the personalization of it, right?
Right, right. So yeah, and the functional food thing,
Hmm.
I don't know about you, but I still don't quite understand what an adaptogen is. Like I've been trying for
Sure,
years,
sure.
but it's you're seeing a lot more sort of particularly one interesting thing about Gen Zers is they really see alcohol as a bad thing. They're really,
Mm-hmm.
they're into the weed, not so into the alcohol. But you're seeing a lot of non-alcoholic but mood-enhancing cocktails, drinks,
Right,
and we're seeing THC and CBD moving more into mainstream. I think you're going to see this idea, and like, lion's mane mushroom and,
right.
I think the idea of being able to really, drill down into something to make you feel better by what you eat is big. And I think that's going to just continue.
Yeah,
I don't know.
absolutely. I want to shift.
Invest in cannabis cocktails.
Right.
That's what we need.
That's your
I just
advice.
recommend
Okay. I'm writing that down.
no advice.
I want to shift gears a little bit because you and I have talked about this in the past. What's happening to journalism sort of overall in this country. And now you're seeing, uh incoming President Trump is, suing news agencies and that kind of thing. What do you
The
think's
Des
going to
Moines
happen?
Register.
Yeah, the
I
Des
mean,
Moines Register.
for running his poll, like what kind of chilling effect is that? I mean, it's
Exactly.
really, yeah, it's scary. Listen, we had an all hands meeting a little while ago where sure, AG Sulzberger addressed the staff, and he said number one, that the Times has a lot of money and is banking for these fights. The legal team is running all kinds of scenarios around this,
Hmm.
First Amendment and access. So I think, and he said it's not going to be easy, but the point is the fear, not the like they want people to be scared and they want people to preemptively censor
Right.
themselves,
Right.
and that's obviously the game. So, but I felt, I know on my news organization, and I think at other news organizations, this idea that we're not gonna do that, and it's going to be a hard fight. And I
Yeah.
think that the real ace in the hole is the amount of the news industry's changed, and there's like Civil Eats, and there's, Politico's got a good food, like there are smaller, nimble news that are going to continually try, at least on the food world, try to keep an eye on and expose. And it may not have that I think are going to be less intimidated
Sure.
than that middle mainstream. I mean, it's a chilling time. Anybody who believes in a free America should fool themselves that they're coming directly after the First Amendment, and obviously free speech matters a whole bunch. So I think it's really important that we're really aware of that, and it's not like, oh yeah, legacy media is dead, and that it's
Right.
that's just you're distracting yourself. And I think people who, I mean, listen, the Times can take lots of hits and we screw a lot of things up. And
Sure.
we are, for every trans activist who says that we're the devil, we're fighting with a right-wing organization that hates us for having gender-free bathrooms.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like
Right.
it's tough to be so, but really, I think people need to think about what is the real issue and who are you going
Yeah.
after, and why. And I don't know, it's an interesting time. I again will always be advocating for for the freedom of speech and lots of information. And it's a scary time. I have to tell you, it alarms me.
It is. Yeah, it is chilling. Chilling is the right word. And it's something you said, when the right and the left hate you, at Food Tank, we think that's our sweet spot when
Right?
both the right
Right.
and the left are like,
Exactly.
hey, so
I mean, yeah. So the idea is just, I think, for those of us who are about straight up information in the food world, just keep our hands on the tiller, keep doing what we do, be curious, be open,
yeah,
and keep dialogue going, but also have a spine. We have to have a spine.
absolutely. Absolutely. Journalists have to be braver than ever. And I'm looking forward to that.
I
Um,
know. See, Daniel, we need you more than ever.
one thing that interested me that you recently did is you sat down with our good friend Tony Tipton Martin and Morgan Bowling, who are behind the Southern Women Cook, which features 300 cooks countries recipes and stories of women who have shaped Southern cuisine. Can
Right.
you talk about this need for telling these untold stories? And I call Tony a culinary detective, right? Because she's had to dig through so many um,
Right.
layers of history to find the real story.
Right. And I don't know, people, listeners will remember her book, Jubilee, which was taking basically, I mean, Tony has, I think, probably certainly the largest private collection of cookbooks by Black American cooks. I mean, she's got 400 and something. And so she, that cookbook went back and looked at all these recipes that we knew about that were really came out of Black kitchens and from Black cooks. And it was made our list of the 100 most significant cookbooks or the most significant cookbooks in the last 100 years. She was on that list. Was on that
Yeah.
list. So
Yeah.
she has certainly done a lot. I think for a long time, certainly those of us who've been in the media game for a long time really had to look hard at how we were telling stories and just kind of taking our thought like, oh, Black food, soul food is so important, and Southern food is so, soul food is one sort of channel that had some specific political implications as people, the Great Migration North, and how people carried Southern food up, and it became this urbanized soul food way to, but it was Black food for a long time was soul food, or Southern food was like fried chicken, and
Yeah.
and we even at the times, and I'll tell you, this is just telling on ourselves a little bit. When we would get recipes back in the day, would be like
Hmm.
my name would be on adapted by Kim Severson from, you know, uh, a Chinese immigrant chef, and it's really that chef's name and recipe that needed to be on there. So we went through and stripped away all of the largely white food writer names that had been on and put that was that's a big thing. So I think we're
Yeah.
continually realizing where food comes from. And, all now it's like, um, I think this idea of really who should be telling those stories and getting to the truth of them is, I mean, that's the current, that's the cultural
Right.
currency right now in food writing, right? But I also think we have to be careful not to, glorify and to make, mythologize these, like the Black cooks in the Thomas Jefferson's kitchen where, I mean, it was
Mm-hmm.
shitty times. It was, I think we can't whitewash what that means. But I also think, again,
Yeah.
to Gen Z, this notion of, that we were all sort of in the culture of authenticity for a long time, right? So is this an authentic recipe? And part of that was, at least from my perspective, realizing that, whoever was cooking that dish, that dish was made as they wanted it to be made and it shouldn't
Right.
be messed with,
Right.
right? But then we became kind of hidebound by authenticity, right? And so I think this second and third wave immigrant kids are all like, like Priya Kushner, who's on our staff, who wrote Indian-ish, like this idea that you can
Right.
expand. Food is changing. Everything changes, right? With every cook who makes it, and that's how culture gets pushed forward. And sometimes the recipe needs to stay the same, but sometimes the story is in how it changes. And I think people are feeling much looser about that now. Um, but it's again that idea that we're just not thinking. Tony always talks about just the myth of Black cooks in America and enslaved people. And she's like, people did not, enslaved women did not come across on the boats with seeds of rice in their braids to start. She's like, you're getting pulled naked onto you're not going and
Right.
pulling seeds, putting them carefully in your braid. She's like, there's just all these myths about, particularly around enslavement and
Yeah.
its effect on what we eat that we need to be more eyes wide open about. That totally went around in
Awesome.
a big circle from what you were asking.
No, no, no. It's so interesting. And I think you're right. Dispelling the myths, making sure that the stories are in the way that they should have been told in the first place. These
Right,
things all make sense. Kim, I want to sort of end on food trends. Over the last year, you've talked about your love of button mushrooms and
right.
how there's been a big spotlight on cabbage. Are there any foods or ingredients that you're really excited about? You mentioned seed oils before. What's on the horizon, do you
Super
think?
interested to where that's going. Well, I tell you, the thing I'm is going to be like the 2025 really good, the year of the sauce. I'm telling you,
Mm,
the Gen Zers will go to one restaurant just for sauce, but it's a way like you're seeing salsa machas and and different forms of harissa, like just the way that we're
hmm.
exploring cultures through sauces. You can it's this great gateway, and I think the Gen Zers love it because it allows, it's a fairly inexpensive investment in
Right,
learning about a new
right.
culture. So I think the year of the sauce would be very big, in my opinion. I also think coffee
Mm,
continually um, savory coffees are becoming a big thing, and Yemeni coffee houses are kind of
uh-huh.
a new thing. So these are like late night spaces, Yemeni coffee, which might be they've certain teas are flavored with cardamom, or they make
Yeah.
the flavor up pots of tea, and there are these places where people who don't want to be at the bars late, where it's loud, can be in a late
Mm,
night environment. And that idea of like, Yemen was where coffee culture really sort of began. And so
sure.
I think this idea of savory coffee and coffee houses is a really, I think, a big and interesting thing. Everybody's cooking with fig leaves. I don't know how long that'll, it's always hard, like
Right.
what is a blip and what is really an
Right.
enduring. And, I think people are getting into really drilling into different kinds of, now that yuzu has become such a popular citrus, there's lots of very interesting Japanese citrus, and it's like we're in a big sour phase. Like I think the American
Sure.
color right now, there's that like sort of sweet sour, but or hot sour. So sour, I think flavors are kind of interesting right now. A lot of people are cooking with
Hmm.
them. Um, yeah, I don't know. I could go on. It's coconut pudding I'm seeing everywhere. I mean, there's a
Ah,
lot of
nice.
little weird, glitches that, that people are doing. And again, these are sometimes fun little items that you'll see being used in recipes. And then there's the more sort of enduring trends, like again, like that micro niche diet,
Right.
hot, like that I think is a super interesting one right now. And also in the hospitality industry, I was talking to people, at the end of the year, I talked to tons of market researchers and chefs and people. But the trend in hospitality is essentially hospitality, like in this very
Right.
uncertain time, in this, period of, we've been through this terrible uncertainty and look what we've been through. But this idea of warm, casual,
Yeah.
embracing like true hospitality as we think about it, not fancy, I don't want to like have some waiter bringing my smoke infused
Right.
cocktail in my caviar bump anymore. That kind of, it's just true warm hospitality
Yeah.
is really the thing. So my prediction for 2025, really good warm hospitality is in. So we'll see if that's
I
right.
hope you're right. And then my final just sort of thought on that, how will that affect the folks who are doing the work, the people who are in the hospitality business, the servers, the cooks, the front of house staff? Will they be respected more? Will they be paid more?
Yeah, I think you'll see kind of that will those folks will be elevated as increasingly at one level, automation, and people like that, there's times when you just want to order on your app and get your food, and that whole world is happening. I mean, Chipotle is going, which dominates everything, is going like almost all drive-in, right? So
Right.
drive-through app. So you're taking away that front of the house
Yeah.
kind of experience there, but then it will elevate. Like, why is chili so big right now and with
Right. Right.
densities, right? Like, but it's because you can, and for about the same price as you could at a fast food, I think for 11 or 12 bucks, you can get a hamburger and you can get a drink and you can, choose your side. And
Right.
because you're sitting down, somebody's bringing your food. There's just a real,
Right.
I don't think that Chili's is like so particularly delicious, although some people may think it is, but it's
Sure.
just that experience, that service. Like there's this hunger
Yeah.
among younger people for sitting down in community and service. So I think you'll find that, as Starbucks unionizes restaurant, there's this idea of labor in the food industry that's getting more powerful. Um, and automation is taking away some of those jobs, or it's changing some of those jobs. So I think I think that labor in the restaurant industry would be super interesting right now, but I think we're going to see it really bifurcated to two worlds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
We'll see. Farm labor is going to be super interesting to see what happens. I mean, what is it like? Roughly a million undocumented workers in
right.
the ag.
Right.
45% of ag workers are undocumented, right? So is that going to lead to more automation in fields, which means that the food will change to be tougher, that, so berries can be picked
Yeah.
more, so I think that's going to have a huge effect on the food industry and on the food we actually eat at the store, because it'll just start to be bred even more than it already is from mechanization if they can't have workers. And that's a whole, that'll be really interesting to watch and see if that comes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a scary time for workers in the food system, farm workers in the food system. So I hope it can be figured out in a way that is just and equitable for everyone. Kim, always fascinating to talk to you. Thank you so much. Where can people find out more information about you and all that you've written?
Well, you can just go to kimseverson.com, or if you are on the New York Times website, you just plug my name in the search bar and there's a whole list of all the stories I've done and that I'm doing. I have my trend story will be out in a couple of weeks, and you can read all about coconut pudding and freeze-dried Skittles, and it'll be great. So yeah,
Can't
but
wait.
I appreciate everybody out there reading the New York Times, and journalism matters. That's my main message. Journalism really matters now.
It certainly does. Thank you for making it matter even more. Happy 2025, Kim.
Yeah, we'll talk next year, I'm sure. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.